The training hall of Orion Academy was one of the largest indoor rooms in the galaxy. Its metal walls were tall like cliffs, reaching up to lights that glowed a cold blue. The air always felt sharp, like it carried electricity. Every sound echoed. Every footstep felt louder than it should. It was the kind of place made to make young cadets nervous. And today, it was working very well. Cadets from more than 20 alien species stood in lines across the shiny floor. Some had scales that shimmered. Some had long, thin arms that bent at strange angles. Some had glowing eyes or soft fur or breathing masks. They were the best of their planets, chosen to train for dangerous missions in deep space. But no one talked today. Everyone was too busy worrying, because today's lesson was only given once every 10 years. At the end of the line stood one human, Cadet Mason Hale. He was not the tallest. He was not the strongest. He didn't glow or hiss or buzz like the others. He simply stood with his shoulders relaxed and his hands behind his back, studying the room quietly. Most cadets avoided humans. Humans were strange to them. Too fast, too emotional, too unpredictable. Some species believed humans were unlucky. Others believed they were secretly dangerous. Mason had gotten used to the whispers. But today, he did not hear anything. Everyone was too scared to whisper. A deep metallic boom echoed as the large doors opened. The instructor entered. Commander Koroth of the Varick species. He was tall and armored, with dark blue skin and ridges on his head that showed his age and experience. His eyes were narrow and sharp, like he saw everything at once. His heavy boots hit the floor with deep, powerful thuds. Every cadet stood straighter. Koroth walked to the center of the hall, looked across the room, and spoke in a calm but cold voice. "Cadets," he said, "today you will face the most important test of your early training." No one moved. No one blinked. This test shows how you think when there are no instructions. When your life depends on your mind, not your muscles. When the world gives you nothing and you still must survive. Many cadets exchanged nervous looks. Koroth lifted his hand toward the empty room. Nothing was on the walls. Nothing was on the floor except a few harmless objects, crates, ropes, broken panels, scrap metal, wires, and tools that did not seem useful. "You will have 10 minutes," Koroth said. "Your task is simple." He paused. The silence became heavy. "Improvise a weapon." A wave of shock ran through the room. Some cadets gasped. Some froze completely. Some turned their heads wildly, looking for anything that might help them. Koroth tapped the control on his wrist. A timer appeared above the hall. 10 o'clock. When the timer starts, he said, "You will begin. Use anything inside this room. I will judge your creativity, not your strength." He glanced across the cadets, scaled, winged, armored, glowing, and finally his eyes stopped on Mason. Mason simply nodded. The instructor pressed a button. The timer started. At once, the room broke into panic. One insectoid cadet rushed to the crates and knocked them over by accident. A reptilian cadet grabbed a rope but fumbled it so badly it tied itself into knots. A glowing alien tried to rip a metal panel from the wall, but its claws slipped and sparks flew everywhere. Everyone moved too fast. Everyone breathed too loud. Everyone tried to think, but panic pushed their thoughts away. Except Mason. He walked calmly to the corner of the hall and looked at the simple objects lying around. His eyes scanned everything. Shapes, edges, sizes, how things fit together, how they didn't. He knelt down and picked up 2 pieces of scrap metal. He turned them in his hands, as if already seeing possibilities. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look scared. In fact, he looked excited. While other cadets argued, tripped, and panicked, Mason placed the 2 metal pieces together and twisted them until they formed a simple but solid tool. Then he set it gently on the floor. The timer still showed 9:02. Mason had already made one. Then he made another, and another, and another. His hands moved fast, but not wild. Everything he did looked planned, practiced, natural, like he had been building things his entire life. He used crates, wires, broken pipes, loose panels, and even small discarded training devices. Nothing went to waste. Koroth watched him carefully. At first, the instructor assumed Mason had created 1 or 2 items. Then he walked closer. On the floor around the human were 12 completed improvised tools. Each different, each clever, each made from parts no one else even looked at. Minutes passed. Mason kept working quietly, his eyes bright with focus. The timer dropped to 5 o'clock. By then, Mason's count had grown to 23. Other cadets stared at him, their confusion growing. Some were angry, some were impressed, some were simply terrified. Mason didn't notice. He was too busy examining a panel hinge, bending it with 2 wires, and snapping into place. Koroth felt his calm expression slip for the first time. He walked around to see the rest. On the floor near the human were now 30 improvised devices, then 35, then 40, then 47. Koroth stopped walking. The entire hall fell silent. Even the cadets who were still trying to build one single object froze to watch Mason. The human exhaled slowly and brushed metal dust from his hands. Only 3 minutes had passed. Mason stepped back from his work and finally looked up. His eyes met the instructor's. Koroth tried to speak, but his voice stuck for a moment. When he finally found his words, they came quiet and serious. "Cadet Hale," he said, "how did you do this?" Mason shrugged lightly, as if the answer was obvious. "Humans improvise," he said. "It's what we do." The timer continued counting down behind them, unnoticed by everyone. The test had changed. The room had changed. Even Koroth had changed, because now he understood something. Humans were far more dangerous and far more creative than he had ever believed. The training hall stayed silent long after the timer stopped counting. The sharp beep that ended the test echoed across the metal walls, but no one reacted. Every alien cadet kept staring at the human, their eyes wide with disbelief. 47 improvised items, all different, all built in minutes. Cadet Mason Hale stood quietly while the others slowly returned to their senses. He looked almost embarrassed by all the attention. He had never meant to stand out. He simply liked solving problems. Commander Koroth stepped forward, his heavy boots hitting the floor with deep metallic thuds. The entire room watched him, waiting for the explosion of anger or shock or confusion. But Koroth showed none of it. He looked calm, too calm. He crossed his arms over his armored chest and studied the human. "Cadet Hale," he said slowly, "do you understand what you had just done?" Mason blinked. "I finished the assignment, sir." A wave of whispers rushed across the cadets. One whispered, "He finished 47 assignments." Another whispered, "Is this normal for humans?" A third whispered, "Do they do this on purpose?" Koroth raised a hand, and silence returned instantly. He walked to the first of Mason's creations and picked it up, a strange combination of a wire loop and a small metal plate. It wasn't dangerous, but it was clever. Most cadets couldn't even understand how Mason had thought of it. Koroth placed it down and picked up a second, then a third, then a seventh. Everything he touched was unique. Everything had a purpose. He turned to face the class. "For most species," he said, 10 minutes is barely enough time to understand the problem. But this human, he found 47 different answers. The cadets shifted uncomfortably. Koroth continued walking through the improvised tools. He crouched beside a device made from 2 broken crates and a snapped panel hinge. "Tell me," he said to Mason, "why did you build so many?" Mason rubbed the back of his neck. "I wasn't sure what kind you wanted, sir, so I made different types. I tried to think of every use." Several cadets almost choked on their own breath. Thinking of one idea was already difficult. Thinking of dozens felt impossible. Koroth narrowed his eyes with interest. "You built them because you were unsure?" "Yes, sir." The instructor stood. Most species freeze when unsure. Mason shrugged. Humans get creative. The room fell into another stunned silence. Koroth motioned for all the cadets to gather around. They formed a large circle around Mason's creations, leaving him standing in the center like a strange exhibit. "Cadets," Koroth said, "look carefully. What you see here is not speed. It is not strength. It is not even skill." He paused, letting the suspense build. "This," he continued, "is a human instinct to adapt." One of the winged cadets lifted a hand. Instructor, she said, why do humans adapt so fast? How can one being create so many things at once? Koroth did not answer. Instead, he turned to Mason. Cadet Hale, explain. Mason looked around awkwardly, seeing dozens of eyes on him. He didn't like speeches. He liked doing things, not talking about them, but he understood it was important. Well, Mason began slowly. Earth isn't the safest place. You learn to fix problems fast, sometimes really fast. You don't always get the right tools. Sometimes you have to use whatever's around you. The insectoid cadet clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. So you train for this? Mason shook his head. Not directly. It's more like life trains you without asking. The reptilian cadet tilted his head. Life trains you. Mason nodded. Yeah, you break something at home, you fix it with tape. You lose something important, you make something else work. You get stuck in a situation, you find another way out. Humans do this all the time. The room grew quiet again, but this time it wasn't because of fear. It was because the cadets were listening, really listening. Mason took a deep breath and continued. Sometimes humans have nothing, no tools, no help, no time, but we still have to solve the problem. So we do. Koroth studied the human closely. He saw no arrogance in the boy's voice, only truth. A simple truth born from a world that forced creativity. He turned to the other cadets. Do you understand now? Humans do not wait. They do not freeze. They do not complain. They adapt instantly, even when the world gives them nothing. Mason felt his cheeks warm. I wouldn't say we never complain, sir. A few cadets laughed softly. The tension in the room loosened for the first time. But Koroth remained serious. He walked closer to the human, lowering his voice. Cadet Hale, in all my years of teaching, I have never seen anything like this. Mason swallowed hard. He didn't know if that was praise or warning. Koroth leaned in slightly. Your ability is not normal, not by any standard in this academy. Mason looked down. I didn't mean to cause a problem. A problem? Koroth echoed. No, you revealed a truth many cadets must learn. Creativity matters more than strength. He raised his voice again. All of you, look at the human. He is not bigger. He is not stronger. His species does not have claws, fangs, armor, or wings. Yet today he succeeded before any of you understood the challenge. The cadets looked at Mason with new eyes. Not fear, not confusion. Respect. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. Koroth stepped back and folded his arms. Very well, he said. If the human adapts this quickly, let us see what he does when the challenge becomes harder. The room tensed. Mason frowned slightly. Harder how, sir? Koroth smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind a teacher gives before revealing something dangerous. Cadet Hale, he said, you have just completed the easiest part. The cadets leaned in, their hearts racing. Koroth's voice dropped into a low rumble. Now, he said, we test how well you fight with what you create. The room froze. Mason felt his heartbeat quicken, and the real trial began. The training hall lights dimmed, leaving only cold blue beams shining down on the cadets. The shadows stretched long across the metal floor, making the room feel even larger and emptier than before. Cadet Mason Hale stood in the center, surrounded by the strange, clever tools he had built. Alien cadets whispered among themselves, glancing nervously between the human and the instructor. Commander Koroth stepped forward, his armor reflecting the pale light. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and the floor vibrated as hidden panels opened around the room. Something was changing. Mason tightened his stance, unsure of what was coming next. Koroth's voice echoed, deep and commanding. Cadets, your first task was to improvise. Your second task is to use what you improvised. The room grew so silent it felt like even the air stopped moving. Some cadets shifted nervously. Others held their single tool awkwardly, like they weren't sure what to do with it. A few looked at Mason with open fear. They remembered his 47 creations. Koroth lifted a hand. Remain calm. This will not be a battle. It is a test of coordination, reaction, and teamwork. With a sharp snap of his fingers, new lights flickered to life in the upper walls. Mechanical humming filled the hall. From the ceiling, spherical training drones descended, small, floating machines with glowing blue eyes and smooth metal bodies. They hovered silently, scanning the cadets. A reptilian cadet gulped loudly. "Instructor, what level drones are those?" Koroth smiled a slow, dangerous smile. "Level 4. Gasps spread through the group. Level 4 drones were fast. Too fast. They were used for training cadets who already had 1 full year of experience. This group had been at the academy for only a few months. Mason's eyes narrowed. He had seen drones before, but never this type. They weren't deadly, but they were unpredictable, perfect for testing reflexes. Koroth pointed toward the hovering machines. "These drones will not harm you, but they will move quickly, dodge attacks, and react to your actions. Your goal is simple." He paused, letting tension build. "Touch them." The cadets blinked in confusion. "Just a touch?" a wing cadet asked. "Yes," Koroth said. "Touch them with the tool you created. That is all." The task sounded easy. It wasn't. Koroth tapped his wrist. Every drone's eye flared bright blue. A loud tone rang through the hall. The test began. The drones shot across the room like streaks of silver lightning. Cadets scattered everywhere. A scaled alien dove behind a crate. A tall insectoid swung their tool wildly but hit nothing but air. A glowing cadet tried to fly upward but yelped when a drone zipped past their head. Mason didn't move at first. He watched. He studied. The drones weren't moving randomly. They had a pattern. Sharp turns, short bursts of speed, sudden stops. They scanned for movement, reacting instantly to any aggressive action. Mason picked up one of his simpler improvised tools. It wasn't dangerous, just a small wooden shape with a curved handle, but it had balance, and he understood how it might be used. A drone flew toward him, scanning. Mason stepped to the side, calm and smooth, letting it pass. He didn't swing. He didn't rush. He waited. Meanwhile, chaos filled the hall. One cadet hit a drone with their tool, but the drone dodged and zipped away. Another cadet tried to trap one in a corner, only to have it rise into the air and escape. Koroth watched all of this with interest, but his eyes kept returning to Mason. Finally, the human moved. He stepped forward and gently tapped the side of a drone as it passed. The drone froze for half a second, surprised, confused, before flying upward again. He had scored the first touch. Several cadets shouted in frustration. He didn't even chase it. How did he time that? Humans are so strange. Mason didn't celebrate. He was already studying the next drone, watching its rhythm, predicting its next move. He stepped lightly to the left, then to the right, then tap. A second drone stopped briefly, its glowing eye flickering. Another point. This time, even Koroth raised an eyebrow. Most cadets couldn't score 1 touch in the first minute. The human had scored 2 with almost no effort. But Mason wasn't thinking about points. His mind was entirely focused on the drones. He switched tools, picking up a different improvised object, something he'd built from wire and a broken part. He tested its weight in his hand, then waited again. He wasn't chasing drones. He was letting them come to him. One drone darted at him with sudden speed. Mason stepped back half a meter, just enough, and tapped it again with perfect timing. 3 points. A silence spread over the cadets. Even the drone seemed to pause, as if confused by the human's calm confidence. Koroth nodded slightly. "Good," he said. "Very good." But he wasn't satisfied. He pressed another button. More drones descended, twice as many, then triple. The hall filled with silver spheres, each one humming with energy. Their glowing eyes scanned the cadets like predators studying prey. Several cadets shouted in panic. "This is too many. Level 4 isn't supposed to have this many drones. We can't touch even one." Mason tightened his grip on his tool. This was different. This was harder. This was fun. He stepped forward into the wave of hovering machines. The drones swarmed around him, moving like a storm of metal and blue light. Mason moved with them, dodging, twisting, stepping past them like he was part of their rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. 3 drones flickered in quick succession. Cadets stared in disbelief. What kind of training do humans do? Is he guessing their movements? No, he's reading them. Mason wasn't thinking anymore. His body simply reacted. A drone dropped low, tap. Another shot high, tap. A third tried to circle him, tap. Karatha's eyes widened. He had expected the human to do well. But this was something else. Mason felt energy rushing through him. He had never been great at lifting heavy things or running the fastest. But this, problem-solving in motion, was his element. He felt alive. And then, for the first time, he smiled. The test wasn't over. The drones weren't done. But neither was a human. Karoth slowly lowered his arms, staring at the human with a new kind of respect. And something else. Curiosity. What exactly was Earth creating? Because whatever it was, it did not break easily. It adapted. And today, the galaxy was learning that firsthand. The drones finally powered down, drifting back to their ceiling docks one by one. Their blue lights faded, and the hall became quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different, heavier, like the whole academy was holding its breath. Cadet Mason Hale stood in the center of the room, breathing softly, not tired at all. The improvised tools he had used lay scattered around his feet. He had tapped more drones than any cadet Karoth had ever trained. Much more. The alien cadets stared at the human, their faces full of shock. Some looked confused. Some looked impressed. A few looked scared. One thing was clear. None of them had expected this from a species without claws, armor, extra limbs, glowing eyes, or wings. Commander Karoth walked forward slowly, eyes raised in disbelief. Even he, a veteran instructor 30 years, had not predicted such performance. Karoth placed his hands behind his back. "Cadets," he said, "your reaction time, teamwork, and awareness will improve with training. But what Cadet Hale demonstrated today is not normal speed." Mason rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't think it was that special, sir." The room erupted with protests. "Not special? You tapped 10 drones in the first minute. You moved like you could see the drone paths. You were calm the whole time. How?" Mason blinked. He had no answer. Karoth motioned for silence. "Enough," the instructor said. "Argue later. For now, we must report these results." A few cadets gasped. "Report? To who?" Karoth tapped his wrist device. The lights brightened. A loud metallic door opened at the far end of the hall, and several new figures walked in, instructors from other divisions. Their armor glowed with different colors: red for warfare, green for tactical strategy, gold for engineering, and silver for survival training. Their arrival meant something important. Somebody had alerted the academy about the human's performance. Karoth bowed slightly. "Thank you for responding so quickly." A tall, silver-armored instructor stepped forward. "We received 10 reports in less than 5 minutes," she said. "Apparently your human cadet is causing confusion." Her voice held no anger, just curiosity. Another instructor, this one in red armor, walked right up to Mason and studied him like an artifact in a museum. "So this is a human?" he said. "Small, very small." Mason frowned. "I'm average height for my species." The instructor tilted his head. "Really? Hard to believe." A few cadets snorted with laughter, but Karoth stepped forward, serious again. Size does not matter. What matters is what he achieved. Observe. He activated projection on the wall. Footage from the test. The drone zipped and spun through the air, and there was Mason in the center of the hall, stepping calmly, tapping drones with perfect timing, as if he were solving a puzzle instead of facing a fast-moving swarm. The instructor stared in silence. The red-armored one whispered, "Impossible." The gold-armored one asked, "Did he know the drone patterns?" The survival instructor shook his head. He predicted them. "Look, his movement changes with the drone's altitude." Mason stood awkwardly, his hand behind his back, avoiding eye contact. He didn't like this attention. He didn't want to be studied or treated like something strange. But the instructors weren't being rude. They were being amazed. The The silver-armored instructor stepped closer to him. "Cadet Hale," she said, "who trained you on Earth?" Mason hesitated. "No one special. I mean, normal teachers, basic sports, some old survival classes." "And you learned to do this by accident?" she asked. Mason shook his head. "Not accident. Humans just learn like this. We grow up solving problems fast. If something breaks, we fix it. If something goes wrong, we find another way." The instructors exchanged glances. The red-armored instructor sighed. "Imagine what a human could do with real training." The gold-armored instructor nodded. "Or real pressure." The survival instructor added, "Or real danger." Their voices filled the hall with a strange new feeling, possibility. For the first time since Mason arrived at the academy, the instructors were not judging him. They were considering him, evaluating him, planning around him. Koroth cleared his throat. Cadet Hale stepped forward. Mason did. Koroth faced the other instructors. "I request evaluation for special placement." The cadets around Mason gasped. Special placement? Only the best of the best were given that opportunity. Students who showed skills beyond normal training levels. The red instructor scoffed. Not enough information. Maybe the drones malfunctioned. The silver instructor frowned. They do not malfunction. And they do not fail to strike unless. The projection showed Mason dodging 3 drones at once, moving barely a few centimeters each time, unless the target thinks faster than the drone can track. The room grew tense. The instructor's eyes returned to Mason. Koroth spoke again. "Let me explain what happened today. The first assignment was to improvise. The human completed 47 improvised items in minutes. The second assignment was to test coordination. He outperformed every cadet here, including some who have better physical abilities." The instructors whispered among themselves. Finally, the red-armored one turned to cadets. "Tell us, what did you see?" The reptilian cadet raised his hand timidly. He didn't panic. The wing cadet added. He didn't rush either. He waited. A furry cadet stepped forward. He didn't treat the drones like enemies. He treated them like puzzles. The insectoid cadet nodded. "Humans are strange, but brilliant." Mason felt heat rise to his cheeks. He wanted to shrink into his boots. The silver instructor turned to Koroth. "I want to test a human myself." Koroth nodded. "You may, but," she added, "not today. We must prepare the environment, and the human must rest." Mason blinked. "Rest? I'm fine, really." The instructor stared at him like he had just said something impossible. Koroth sighed. "Humans, always pushing limits even when unnecessary." The gold instructor stepped back and pointed toward the projection screen. "We will analyze this footage. Then we will decide the human's future path." Future path? Mason's heart pounded. What did that mean? The instructors left through the heavy metal doors, speaking quickly among themselves. When the hall became quiet again, Koroth turned to class. "Cadets," he said, "today was not normal. Today, you witnessed something rare." His eyes landed on Mason, and we are only beginning to understand it. The cadets stared at the human with a new expression. Not fear, not confusion. Respect. Mason looked down, unsure how to react. He had never meant to become the center of attention. He had only done what humans do best. Adapt. Commander Koroth stood alone in the dim control chamber, staring at the glowing screens that showed the training hall below. His 4 eyes narrowed in quiet thought. For days he had watched Mason Hale, the lone human cadet in Orion Academy, break every limit the Academy had set. Mason improvised faster than any alien. He solved challenges with strange but effective human ideas, and he inspired the other cadets without even trying. Koroth knew what this meant. The next test had to be different, harder, unpredictable, something no cadet could prepare for. Because if Mason succeeded again, the Academy would have to rethink everything it knew about humans. Koroth tapped a glowing panel and activated the simulation chamber, the most advanced training room in the Academy. It could create storms, illusions, moving walls, and challenges so realistic that even senior soldiers sometimes complained. But today the simulation would be set to something new, a mission with no weapons, no tools, and no instructions, only pure instinct and teamwork. Koroth watched the final settings lock into place. Then he called the class. The cadets entered the massive metal chamber, whispering nervously. Thick lights flickered overhead as a tall, armored door slammed shut behind them. The room was completely empty. No crates, no panels, no objects that looked useful. Just smooth walls and a single line on the floor. Mason stood among the alien cadets, calm but curious. He felt something strange in the air, like the silence before a storm. The other species were tense. The insectoid Helic clicked his mandibles nervously. The scaled Drevik blinked his wide yellow eyes. Even the strong four-armed Braca shifted her stance, confused. Koroth entered through a high platform above them. His voice echoed loudly. "Cadets, this is your final test." All eyes looked up. You will face a simulated rescue mission. You cannot destroy the environment. You cannot call for help. You cannot create anything that can harm another cadet. The aliens exchanged anxious looks. There will be obstacles. There will be pressure. There will be confusion. Your only tools will be your mind and your cooperation. Mason felt his heart beat steady. A mission without tools? A mission that forced the cadets to think instead of fight? He liked the sound of that. Without warning, the light shut off. Darkness swallowed the room. A loud alarm blared. The ground shook. Panels in the walls opened, shifting the environment into a maze of narrow tunnels, rising platforms, and deep pits. A holographic map appeared above the group, showing a blinking dot far away. Karotha's voice echoed faintly. Your mission: reach the injured civilian and lead them to safety. The time is limited. Begin. Then everything went silent. The cadets panicked immediately. Some shouted. Some ran in the wrong direction. Others froze, unable to decide which path to take. In the darkness, shadows moved strangely, making everything feel uncertain. But Mason did not panic. He took a slow breath and looked at the hologram again before it faded. He studied the walls, the floor, the smell of the air currents. He thought of Earth, school escape drills, hiking in forests, solving puzzles with friends. He raised his voice, calm but strong. Everyone, stop. Listen to me. The aliens hesitated. Mason's confidence held them still. We need to move together. No one wins alone. Follow the airflow. We're looking for the deep tunnel on the right side. That's where the injured civilian is. The Helic chirped, confused. How do you know that? Mason pointed. The air is colder on that side. That means ventilation from deeper hallways. The simulation designers want us to look for the low route. Bracken nodded slowly. Human logic again. The group followed Mason into the twisting tunnels. The first obstacle came fast. A long bridge appeared above a moving platform. The bridge shook violently, making it almost impossible for large or heavy creatures to cross. Some cadets tried but nearly fell. Mason crouched, studying the movement. We cross one at a time. Lighter cadets first. Heavier cadets lean forward and keep balance low. His simple instructions worked. One by one, every cadet crossed safely. Mason helped the tallest Drevik by pointing out where the platform dipped. The aliens stared at him in amazement. They pushed deeper into the maze. Fog filled the next chamber. Glowing shapes moved in the mist, distracting and scaring some cadets. The mist played tricks. Helic stopped suddenly. I can't see anything. What if something attacks us? Mason placed a hand on his shoulder. Nothing here can hurt us. It's fear testing, not danger testing. Stay close. Walk with one hand on the wall. The cadets formed a chain. Mason led the front, guiding them slowly. The fog faded as they stepped into a bright chamber. In the center of the room lay a holographic injured civilian, a training dummy with glowing indicators. They had reached the target. But the mission was not over. The moment they touched the civilian, the floor shifted. Walls closed in. A countdown appeared above them. 60 seconds. The Academy expected panic. The test was designed for failure on the first attempt. But this time the aliens didn't panic. They looked at Mason. He scanned the room quickly. The moving walls won't crush us. They're hurting us. That means one wall has a hidden exit. Spread out. Look for air movement. The cadets checked each wall. Baraka shouted, "Here, I feel wind." They rushed to her. Mason pushed against the panel. It slid open, revealing a narrow escape path. Together, they carried the civilian through the tunnel, just as the countdown reached 5 seconds. The exit door opened. Bright light filled the chamber. They had completed the mission. The cadets collapsed with relief, cheering, laughing, some even hugging. Their fear turned into pride. Their confusion became confidence. And they all looked at Mason with new respect. Not because he was the fastest, not because he built 47 tools, but because he made everyone stronger. The simulation chamber opened with a deep metallic groan, and the bright lights of Orion Academy spilled into the tunnel where the cadets stood. Their faces were covered in sweat, dust, and exhaustion, but the moment the oxygen-rich air filled their lungs, they felt a rush of victory. Mason Hale stepped out last, making sure all the other cadets, and even the holographic injured civilian, were safely outside before him. The alien cadets gathered around, talking excitedly, their earlier fear replaced with joy. The insectoid Helic tapped his sharp legs on the floor in excitement. "We actually passed. I never pass first submissions." The massive Braca gave a deep laugh. Her forearms crossed proudly. "Human Mason, your brain is too strange, but in a helpful way." Drevik, still trembling a little, shook his head in disbelief. "No one leads in a simulation like that, not even senior cadets." Mason didn't show pride or ego. He simply smiled. "Everyone did their part. I only helped organize things." But the others knew the truth. Without Mason, they would have failed. He had guided them through darkness, illusions, shifting platforms, and tight countdowns. He saved them when panic almost took over. And above them, watching from the control platform, stood Commander Koroth. His 4 eyes were fixed on Mason, not with suspicion anymore, but with something deeper. Respect. The cadets were ordered to the main hall for evaluation. The huge metal doors opened with a heavy clang, revealing a crowd far larger than usual. Dozens of instructors, senior officers, and commanders from across the academy stood waiting. Word had spread. The human had done the impossible again. Mason walked with his team into the center of the hall. The silence was powerful. Aliens of every shape and size watched him, not with fear now, but with curiosity, admiration, and even a little pride. Finally, Koroth stepped forward. His large frame cast a long shadow over the group. He carried a heavy ceremonial staff, used only for the Academy's most important announcements. When he spoke, his voice echoed across the entire room. "Cadets of Orion Academy," Koroth began, "you have completed the final simulation, something most cadets fail on their first attempt." The crowd murmured. Koroth lifted the staff slightly. But today, something rare happened. He looked directly at Mason, and every alien in the hall followed his gaze. A human cadet with minimal training and limited physical gifts led the entire team to success, not through strength, not through advanced technology, but through creativity, logic, and unity. Mason felt dozens of eyes on him. It made him uncomfortable, but he stood straight. Koroth continued, voice growing louder. "Humans are different. They do not rely on natural armor, multiple limbs, or telepathic minds. They rely on something else, something even our advanced species often forget." He paused. Then he raised a hand and snapped his fingers. The hall lights shifted, projecting holograms of the simulation. They showed Mason guiding the group through fog, across shaking bridges, toward the air current exit, and through the final tunnel seconds before the timer hit 0. The crowd watched in awe. Koroth turned to face everyone again. Adaptability, improvisation, courage. These traits make humans exceptional. Another instructor stepped forward, a tall, blue-skinned officer named Seraph. "He helped my cadets last week during a metal collapse drill, without being asked." A shorter instructor added, "His designs during the Improvise Tool Challenge are now being studied by 3 departments." Whispers filled the room. 47 tools, and all functional in under 10 minutes? Mason felt his cheeks warm. He wished they would stop talking about it. But the moment wasn't over. Korath struck the floor with his ceremonial staff, making a sharp, ringing sound. Cadet Mason Hale stepped forward. Mason swallowed hard and obeyed. Korath looked down at him. You have passed every test. You have reshaped how this academy views humans. You have shown leadership, even when not assigned to lead. The tension in the hall rose. Therefore, by the authority of the Orion Academy Council, I grant you the title of... Another dramatic pause. Prime Cadet. Gasps erupted across the hall. Prime Cadet was not a normal rank. It was given only to individuals who exceeded expectations in every aspect. Braca whispered loudly, "No one gets Prime Cadet in their first cycle." Hellick hiss-clicked, "This is history." Korath wasn't finished. "And furthermore," he added, his voice gentle yet powerful, "you are assigned a strategic advisor to your training squad. You will guide them in problem-solving tasks and instruct them in improvisational thinking." Mason stared at him, shocked. I will lead them." Korath nodded. "You already have." For the first time since arriving at the academy, Mason felt something deep inside him, a warm feeling heavy with meaning, belonging. After the ceremony, the cadets crowded around Mason, congratulating him in their own alien ways. Clicks, glowing patterns, tail movements, shoulder taps. Drevik asked excitedly, "Human Mason, will you teach us those, human tricks again?" Mason laughed. "Sure, but I don't have tricks. Humans just try things until something works." Hellick chirped, "That is the trick." Even Korath approached him. "Cadet Hale," he said quietly, "you have changed more minds in this academy than you know. You showed that strength is not the only measure of worth." He rested a heavy hand on Mason's shoulder. "Give a human nothing, and they will still create a path." Mason nodded. "Thank you, Commander." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Mason stood in the center of the hall, looking around at aliens who now saw him not as an outsider, but as one of them, a teammate, a leader, a prime cadet. And for the first time in the Academy's history, everyone understood humans were not the weakest species. They were the most unpredictable, and that made them powerful.